I am Celia Reynolds, 34 years old, and the art gallery director whose life shattered at a luxury dinner. For 3 years, I was married to Andrew Bennett, a wealthy tech entrepreneur who seemed perfect until we faced infertility due to my medical condition. Then came that fateful night when his ex-girlfriend, Natalie, made her shocking offer right across the table. "I can give you a baby if you want, Andrew, because your wife isn't capable of it." Everyone expected me to crumble, but instead I smiled and whispered, "Follow your heart." The very next morning, I called my lawyer, and what happened after changed everything. Before I tell you my full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and give this video a like if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when blindsided by betrayal. Growing up in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, I always had a passion for art. My father was a literature professor at Boston University, and my mother ran a small bookstore that specialized in art books and prints. Our home was modest but filled with books ideas and frequent discussions about beauty and meaning. They encouraged my artistic interests, taking me to museums every weekend and supporting my decision to study art history at NYU. College in New York opened my world. I worked multiple internships at galleries and museums, building connections and learning the business side of art. After graduation, I secured an assistant position at the prestigious Whitman Gallery in Chelsea. The hours were long, the pay was minimal, and my tiny Brooklyn apartment could barely fit a bed, but I was determined to make my mark in the competitive art world. Over the next 8 years, I worked my way up through sheer determination. Nights studying artists and movements, weekends spent at exhibitions, and countless hours networking with collectors and artists. Eventually, I became the director of modern collections, known for discovering emerging artists and creating shows that consistently sold out on opening night. That's when Andrew Bennett walked into my life. His tech company, Next Gen Solutions, was hosting a charity gala, and they wanted original artwork displayed throughout the venue. As the gallery's representative, I curated a selection of pieces that would complement their brand while showcasing our artists. During the installation, a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit approached me as I was directing the placement of a large abstract canvas. "You must be Celia Taylor," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Andrew Bennett." I recognized him immediately from tech magazines and business profiles. At 36, he had already built a company valued at over $300 million. Self-made and brilliant, with dark hair that always looked slightly tousled and intense blue eyes that seemed to analyze everything they saw. "The painting needs to be centered more," I said, shaking his hand briefly before turning back to the installation team. He looked slightly taken aback at my businesslike manner. Perhaps he was used to people fawning over him. "Of course," he said, watching as I directed the adjustment. "You clearly know what you're doing." "That's why your company hired the gallery," I replied with a professional smile. The gala was a success, and several pieces sold to wealthy tech executives. As I was preparing to leave, Andrew approached again, this time with a glass of champagne for me. "Your eye for placement transformed the space," he said. "Would you be interested in consulting on some art for my home? I have a new penthouse that needs the right pieces." I assumed it was a line, but I handed him my business card anyway. The gallery would be happy to arrange a consultation. "And if I wanted you specifically," he asked, "then you'd need to go through the gallery and request me," I replied, maintaining my professional boundary. He did exactly that, calling the following day and insisting that only Celia Taylor would do. My boss was thrilled at the prospect of a wealthy tech entrepreneur becoming a client. What I expected to be a simple consultation turned into a 4-hour conversation about art, architecture, literature, and travel. Andrew was surprisingly knowledgeable about Renaissance painters and contemporary sculptors alike. His penthouse had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, but it was indeed a blank canvas artistically. After that initial meeting, he called the gallery almost weekly with questions about specific pieces, always requesting me. Then came dinner invitations, which I declined twice before finally accepting. He took me to a small French restaurant in the village, not the flashy upscale place I had expected. We talked until the restaurant closed and he walked me to a taxi asking if he could see me again. Our courtship was a whirlwind of thoughtful dates. He remembered everything I told him, from my favorite flowers, peonies, to my childhood dream of seeing Monet's garden at Giverny. For my birthday, he flew us to Paris for the weekend specifically to visit the garden. He was attentive, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and passions. Andrew occasionally mentioned previous relationships, most notably Natalie from his Stanford days. They had dated through college and briefly afterward before career paths took them in different directions. She wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to build a tech empire. We wanted different things, he explained once without elaboration. I thought nothing of it at the time. After a year of dating, Andrew proposed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the European Paintings Gallery that housed my favorite Vermeer. He had arranged for a private viewing after hours, and as we stood alone before the masterpiece, he got down on one knee. The ring was vintage platinum, with an emerald-cut diamond he had selected because, like you, it has both clarity and depth. I hesitated before answering. Despite our connection, I was aware of our different backgrounds and lifestyles. I came from a world of ideas and beauty, but modest means. He came from wealth and business. Would we truly build a life of shared values? Are you sure we want the same things? I asked. He took my hands. I want a partner who challenges me, who sees beauty where others see transactions, who keeps me grounded in what matters. That's you, Celia. I said yes, believing we were building something meaningful together. Our wedding at his family's estate in Connecticut was featured in society pages more lavish than I would have chosen, but Andrew wanted to celebrate properly. His parents, both from old New England money, were politely welcoming but clearly assessing whether I was suitable for their son. My parents looked out of place among the wealthy guests, but were happy for me. Early marriage was a time of adjustment and compromise. We renovated his penthouse to reflect both our tastes, though his preference for minimalist luxury often won over my desire for eclectic warmth. We traveled extensively, from art festivals in Basel to tech conferences in Tokyo. I continued my career, eventually becoming executive director of the gallery while supporting Andrew at business events. His family, particularly his mother, frequently hinted about grandchildren. At holiday gatherings, she would mention friends whose children were already parents, or pointedly discuss the Bennett family traditions that should be passed down. Andrew would smile and say, "All in good time, Mother." In private, we discussed children as a someday plan. I was focused on my career, and Andrew was expanding his company internationally. Yet I imagined a future with a child who would inherit Andrew's analytical mind and my artistic sensibility. A child who would know both the value of beauty and the discipline of creation. I didn't realize then how cruelly that dream would be tested, or how it would reveal the true foundation of what I thought was an unshakable marriage. After celebrating our second anniversary with a trip to the Amalfi Coast, Andrew and I decided it was time to start trying for a baby. We were both established in our careers, financially secure, and our renovated penthouse even had a room that would make a perfect nursery with windows facing the morning sun. "Let's just see what happens," Andrew suggested as we lay in bed overlooking the Italian coastline. "No pressure, no tracking cycles at first. Just let nature take its course." I agreed, excited about this new chapter. We returned to New York with a sense of possibility, our future expanding to include a child. The first few months were almost like a game. We joked about practice making babies and speculated about whether our child would have my curly hair or his dimples. By the 6-month mark, my period remained frustratingly predictable. I began tracking my cycle with an app identifying fertile days and reading about ways to increase our chances. Andrew bought me prenatal vitamins and cut back on his evening scotch. We were still optimistic, reminding each other that many couples take a year or more to conceive. At the 9-month mark, I mentioned my concerns to my gynecologist during my annual exam. Dr. Miller listened carefully and suggested some preliminary tests for both of us if we reached the 1-year mark without success. "It's standard procedure," she assured me. "Most likely everything is fine, but it's good to check." When we passed the 1-year milestone, I made appointments for us both. Andrew grumbled about the semen analysis, joking about the indignity of the collection process, but followed through. I underwent blood tests to check my hormone levels and a transvaginal ultrasound to examine my reproductive organs. The first sign of trouble came when Dr. Miller called me personally, rather than having her nurse schedule a follow-up. "Celia, I'd like you to come in to discuss your results. Can you bring Andrew with you?" Her office felt smaller somehow as we sat across from her desk. She explained that my blood tests showed hormonal imbalances consistent with potential fertility issues. More concerning were the ultrasound results, which indicated possible endometriosis and abnormalities with my fallopian tubes. "What does that mean exactly?" Andrew asked, his business mindset seeking concrete facts. Dr. Miller's expression was gentle but honest. "Endometriosis can interfere with fertility in several ways. Based on these images, I suspect Celia has moderate to severe endometriosis with potential scarring of the fallopian tubes. This would make natural conception difficult, possibly impossible." The word impossible echoed in my mind as she continued explaining treatment options and next steps. She recommended a laparoscopy to definitively diagnose and potentially treat the endometriosis, followed by a hysterosalpingogram to determine if my tubes were actually blocked. I underwent both procedures the following month. The laparoscopy confirmed stage 3 endometriosis with significant scarring. The hysterosalpingogram revealed that both my fallopian tubes were severely damaged, one completely blocked and the other partially obstructed. Dr. Miller explained that eggs couldn't travel normally from my ovaries to my uterus, making natural conception highly unlikely. Andrew held me as I cried that night. "We have options," he whispered into my hair. "This isn't the end of our family dreams." We discussed those options extensively in the following weeks. In vitro fertilization seemed the most promising path, though it would be expensive, invasive, and offered no guarantees. Surrogacy was another possibility, but the legal and emotional complexities gave me pause. Adoption was also on the table, though Andrew seemed less enthusiastic about that route. "Let's try IVF first," he suggested. "We have the resources, and medical technology is amazing now. Let's give science a chance before exploring other options." I agreed, and we began the grueling IVF process. Daily hormone injections that Andrew learned to administer, constant monitoring appointments that required early morning visits to the fertility clinic, and the emotional roller coaster of hope and anxiety. The medications made me bloated, emotional, and sometimes physically ill, but I persevered, focused on our goal. Our first embryo transfer resulted in a chemical pregnancy, a very early miscarriage that cruelly raised our hopes with a faint positive test before dashing them days later. The second attempt failed to implant at all. For the third try, we opted for genetic testing of the embryos before transfer, an additional expense, but one that might increase our chances. During this time, I noticed subtle shifts in Andrew's behavior. He began working later, sometimes missing monitoring appointments he had previously prioritized. When he did attend, he seemed distracted, checking emails on his phone while the ultrasound technician measured my follicles. One evening, I overheard him on the phone in his home office door, slightly ajar. "It's just frustrating, all this money and time, and for what? The doctor basically said she has defective genes or whatever." I pushed the door open, anger and hurt competing in my chest. "Defective genes. Is that how you see me now?" Andrew spun around, ending the call abruptly. "Celia, I didn't hear you there. I was just talking to my brother, venting a little. By reducing me to defective genes." My voice shook. He crossed the room, reaching for my hands, which I pulled away. "I'm sorry, that was a terrible choice of words. I'm frustrated too, and sometimes I say stupid things. I don't think of you that way." "Do I?" I challenged. "Because lately it seems like this whole fertility journey is an inconvenience to your schedule." Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm under a lot of pressure at work. We're preparing for another funding round, and the investors are demanding. But that's no excuse. I'm sorry, truly." His apology seemed sincere, and I was too exhausted from hormones and disappointment to argue further. We made up, and Andrew promised to be more present and supportive. After the third failed IVF cycle, our doctor suggested taking a break to let my body recover. The constant medications and procedures had taken a physical toll, and the emotional impact was even greater. Each failure felt like my body betraying not just me but Andrew and our future together. Maybe we should pause treatments for a while, Andrew suggested one night over dinner. Focus on us, on our marriage. We could take that trip to Japan you've been wanting. The suggestion surprised me, but I welcomed the idea of a break from the medical treadmill. What about a fourth cycle? Dr. Simmons said we could try a different protocol. Andrew set down his wine glass carefully. We can revisit IVF later if you want, but right now I think we need to remember why we're together in the first place. This process has taken over our lives. I agreed, and we planned a 2-week vacation to Kyoto for the following month. I focused on work preparing for a major exhibition that would open just before our trip. The gallery became my refuge, a place where my value wasn't tied to my reproductive capabilities. What I didn't realize then was that while I was throwing myself into art, Andrew was finding his own refuge elsewhere. And that elsewhere had a name from his past, Natalie. 6 months after our decision to pause fertility treatments, Andrew and I attended the annual Heart of Hope Charity Gala, benefiting children's medical research. The event was held at the Plaza Hotel, with tickets costing $5,000 per couple. As the wife of a major tech CEO, I had become accustomed to these lavish events, wearing designer gowns and making small talk with New York's elite. That evening, I wore a deep emerald Valentino gown, my hair swept up in an elegant chignon. Andrew looked handsome in his tuxedo as we circulated through the ballroom, champagne flutes in hand. He was in his element at these events, networking effortlessly, while I smiled politely beside him. Andrew Bennett, is that you? We turned to see a striking woman approaching. She was tall and slender, with sleek blonde hair, wearing a red dress that hugged her figure perfectly. Natalie. Andrew's face lit up with genuine surprise and pleasure. What are you doing here? I'm representing Boston Children's Hospital tonight, she said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. I'm heading up their new pediatric research initiative. That's incredible, Andrew replied, his hand lingering on her arm longer than necessary. Natalie, this is my wife Celia. Celia, this is Natalie Palmer. We knew each other at Stanford. His college sweetheart, Natalie added with a playful smile, extending her hand to me. It's so nice to finally meet you. Andrew was quite the catch back then, too. Lovely to meet you, I responded politely, noting the finally in her statement as if she had been waiting for this moment. Are you a doctor at Boston Children's? Yes, I'm a pediatric oncologist, she answered. I've been there for 8 years now, but recently took on this research director role as well. The conversation continued, with Andrew and Natalie reminiscing about their college days, while I stood by contributing occasional comments. I learned that Natalie was married to a surgeon named Robert, who was currently at a medical conference in London. They had no children by choice, she emphasized. Our careers are our babies right now. As the evening progressed, I noticed how animated Andrew became in Natalie's presence, laughing at inside jokes and recalling shared memories. There was an ease between them that spoke of deep familiarity. When we parted ways at the end of the gala, Natalie hugged Andrew tightly. We should catch up properly sometime. I'm in New York regularly for hospital business now. Absolutely, Andrew agreed quickly. I'll have my assistant contact you. On the ride home, Andrew mentioned casually that Natalie's hospital was exploring technology solutions for patient care coordination. Her team might be interested in our healthcare platform. Could be a good partnership opportunity. I nodded, thinking nothing of it at the time. Andrew's company often worked with healthcare organizations, and the connection seemed professional enough. Over the following weeks, however, Natalie's name began appearing in Andrew's conversations with increasing frequency. Natalie called about that hospital integration, or I'm meeting Natalie for lunch to discuss the project specs. always framed as business, always perfectly reasonable. 2 months after the gala, these meetings were occurring weekly, sometimes more. Andrew would come home late, smelling faintly of an unfamiliar perfume, his explanation always the same. The meeting ran long. Hospital administrators talk even more than tech people. One evening, while Andrew was showering, his phone lit up on the nightstand. Normally, I respected his privacy, but something prompted me to glance at the notification. A text from Natalie. Loved seeing you today. Same time Thursday, that hotel has the perfect meeting rooms. My stomach tightened. The winking emoji and quotation marks around meeting rooms seemed deliberately suggestive. When Andrew emerged from the bathroom, I confronted him directly. Is something going on between you and Natalie? He looked genuinely shocked. What? No, of course not. We're working on the hospital project. I saw her text, I admitted, about the hotel with perfect meeting rooms. Andrew's face relaxed. Oh, that. We met at the Four Seasons because it's close to her hospital's New York office. They have these great business suites with full tech setups. Natalie was being ironic about corporate jargon. You know how hospitals usually have terrible conference rooms? His explanation was plausible, and he showed me other texts in their conversation thread that were indeed about hospital technology integration. I apologized for doubting him, feeling ashamed of my suspicion. It's fine, he said, kissing my forehead. You're still emotional from all the fertility stuff. It's understandable. That comment stung. Was he dismissing my legitimate concern as hormone-induced paranoia? But I let it go, not wanting to seem like the stereotype of an insecure wife. The following week, Andrew suggested something unexpected. Natalie and Robert are in town this weekend. I thought it might be nice to have dinner together, the four of us. I thought Robert was always at conferences, I remarked. He's here this time, Andrew replied. It would be good for you and Natalie to get to know each other better, especially with our companies working so closely now. I agreed, though something felt off about the suggestion. Andrew made reservations at Per Se, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, with a 3-month waiting list that somehow didn't apply to him. The day of the dinner, I spent extra time preparing, choosing a sophisticated black dress, and having my hair and makeup done professionally. If I was going to meet the woman who had been consuming so much of my husband's time, I wanted to look my best. We arrived at the restaurant precisely at 8, the maitre d' showing us to a prime table overlooking Central Park. A bottle of champagne was already chilling in a silver bucket. Courtesy of Mr. Bennett, the sommelier explained, pouring 2 glasses. Shouldn't we wait for the others? I asked. Andrew checked his phone. Natalie just texted. Robert couldn't make it after all emergency surgery, but she's on her way. Of course, Robert couldn't make it. I was beginning to wonder if Robert existed at all. Natalie arrived 15 minutes later, stunning in a form-fitting blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She kissed Andrew on both cheeks before turning to me. Celia, so nice to see you again. I'm sorry Robert couldn't join us. He was so looking forward to meeting you both. The maitre d' seated her next to Andrew directly across from me. As champagne was poured and menus presented, I observed the body language between them. She leaned toward him when speaking, touched his arm. For emphasis, laughed with her head thrown back at his jokes. Andrew seemed equally engaged, his attention rarely shifting to me. The evening had just begun, but I already felt like an outsider at my own dinner table. Per Se's 9-course tasting menu provided a lengthy backdrop for what became the most uncomfortable dinner of my life. Each exquisitely plated dish arrived with meticulous explanation from the server, creating brief interludes in the increasingly tense conversation. So Andrew tells me you run an art gallery, Natalie said as we began our first course, a delicate oyster preparation served on mother-of-pearl spoons. That must be fun, being surrounded by pretty things all day. The diminutive description of my career as fun and focused on pretty things wasn't subtle. I'm the executive director of Whitman Gallery in Chelsea, I corrected. We represent emerging artists and established modern masters. My last exhibition was featured in Art News. How creative, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've always wished I had time for artistic hobbies. Andrew jumped in before I could respond. Celia's gallery is one of the most respected in the city. She just secured the estate collection of Harrison West. I was surprised by his defense, but Natalie quickly redirected. Remember that painting class we took senior year, Andrew? You were terrible. They launched into shared memories of a Stanford art elective where they had apparently been partners. You couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. She laughed, touching his arm again. Still can't, Andrew admitted, grinning. That's why I married an art expert. The conversation shifted to Natalie's work, and she spoke passionately about pediatric cancer research. Despite my growing dislike for her, I had to acknowledge her obvious intelligence and dedication to her field. Andrew listened intently, asking insightful questions about clinical trials and research protocols. The hospital's board is impressed with your platform proposal, she told Andrew. We could revolutionize how patient data is managed across departments. That's the goal, Andrew replied. Seamless integration, better patient outcomes. As they discussed technical details, I sipped my wine and observed them. They spoke the same language, not just medicine and technology, but a shared history and worldview. Both ambitious, driven from similar privileged backgrounds. I felt the gulf between Andrew and myself widening with each exchange. By the fifth course, Natalie had skillfully directed the conversation to college friends' vacations they had taken together, professors they had shared all topics that naturally excluded me. I maintained a polite smile, occasionally checking my watch beneath the table. When the sixth course arrived, a perfectly seared scallop with truffle emulsion, the sommelier poured a new wine pairing. Natalie raised her glass. To reconnections, she said, looking directly at Andrew. Some things are just meant to be. Andrew hesitated briefly before touching his glass to hers. I noticed he didn't meet my eyes as he took a sip. So, Natalie said, setting down her glass. When are you two planning to start a family? Andrew always talked about wanting children early. The question hit like a physical blow. Andrew stiffened beside me, his fork pausing mid-air. We're working on our timeline, he said vaguely. Natalie tilted her head. But you're not getting any younger. Especially you, Celia. Aren't you 34 now? The biological clock gets louder after 35. I maintained my composure, years of dealing with difficult gallery patrons serving me well. We're on our own schedule, but thank you for your concern. Oh, I didn't mean to pry, she said, not sounding apologetic at all. It's just that Andrew always wanted at least 3 kids. We used to talk about names and everything. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. That was a long time ago, Nat. Children are a blessing, she continued, ignoring his discomfort. In my practice, I see so many families cherishing their little ones, especially when those children face health challenges. It really puts things in perspective. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. Yes, I imagine it does. Have you two considered fertility treatments? She pressed. So many of my colleagues' patients are IVF babies now. It's practically standard for career women who wait. Andrew cleared his throat. Natalie, maybe this isn't dinner conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. I just thought as a doctor I might be able to offer some insights or recommendations for specialists. The presumption that we needed her medical connections was galling, but more troubling was her specific mention of fertility treatments. Had Andrew discussed our private struggles with her? We have excellent doctors, thank you, I replied evenly. Natalie nodded, then turned to Andrew. Remember when we talked about having kids? You wanted boys to take fishing like your dad did with you. Vaguely, Andrew mumbled, studying the scallop on his plate with unusual intensity. The 7th course arrived, offering momentary relief. As the server described the aged duck with cherry gastrique, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to collect my thoughts. In the elegant marble bathroom, I splashed cold water on my wrists, a trick my mother had taught me for calming nerves. The woman in the mirror looked composed, but her eyes held a knowledge she was just beginning to accept. My husband had betrayed my confidence, sharing our most intimate struggles with his ex-girlfriend. And based on their interaction tonight, perhaps he had betrayed more than that. When I returned to the table, they were laughing about something, heads close together. They straightened up as I approached like guilty teenagers. "Did I miss something funny?" I asked, taking my seat. "Just an old inside joke," Andrew explained vaguely. "From college." The final savory course arrived, a perfectly cooked Wagyu beef with truffle potato puree. As we ate, Natalie steered the conversation back to children. "The hospital gala next month is honoring families who've overcome fertility challenges," she said. "So inspiring to see what people will do to have a child." I set down my fork. "Indeed. Of course, there are many paths to parenthood," she continued. "Surrogacy is becoming much more accepted. One of the hospital board members just welcomed twins via surrogate." Andrew was unusually quiet, his focus entirely on cutting his beef into perfectly even pieces. Natalie took a sip of her red wine, then delivered the blow I now realized she had been building toward all evening. She looked directly at Andrew and said, "I can give you a baby if you want, Andrew, because your wife isn't capable of it." The restaurant seemed to freeze. A waiter passing behind us nearly dropped a tray. At a nearby table, a woman audibly gasped. Andrew turned to me, clearly expecting a scene, tears, shouting, storming out. His expression was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. Guilt, perhaps, or relief that the offer had finally been spoken aloud. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the truth of my marriage. The careful calculations behind Andrew's every action. The way he had compartmentalized his life, keeping me in a beautiful box labeled wife, while pursuing other options. I saw how he had shared our most private pain with this woman, perhaps hoping she would make exactly this offer. I could have screamed. I could have thrown my wine in her face or his. I could have created the scene they were both expecting. Instead, I smiled calmly and whispered, "Follow your heart, Andrew." His eyes widened in confusion. This wasn't the script he had anticipated. The dessert course arrived in the stunned silence that followed a chocolate soufflé with vanilla bean ice cream. We ate without speaking, the awkwardness stretching between us like a physical presence. When the check came, Andrew paid quickly, eager to end the excruciating evening. Outside the restaurant, Natalie attempted a casual goodbye. "This was lovely," she said, as if she hadn't just propositioned my husband at dinner. "We should do it again soon." "Good night, Natalie," I replied coolly. In the car home, Andrew finally spoke. "Celia, about what Natalie said. She was joking. She has an inappropriate sense of humor sometimes." "Was she joking?" I asked quietly. "Or was she saying out loud what you two have already discussed privately?" "That's ridiculous," he protested, but his eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead. "She was trying to get a rise out of you. And you've told her about our fertility issues, our private medical matters." He hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion. "I might have mentioned it in passing. As a doctor, she understands these things." In passing," I repeated, "like when you were passing through hotel meeting rooms together." "You're overreacting," he said, his tone growing defensive. "Natalie and I are friends, colleagues, nothing more." "Nothing more," I echoed. "Then why did she feel comfortable offering to carry your child at dinner with your wife?" He had no answer for that. When we arrived home, Andrew retreated to the guest room without another word. I lay awake in our bed, reviewing our marriage as if examining a painting for forgery, subtle brushstrokes that didn't quite match colors that weren't true to the artist's palette. Had I been living with an imitation of love these past 3 years? By morning, I knew exactly what needed to be done. I woke at 5:30 after fitful sleep, quietly slipping from bed to avoid waking Andrew, who had returned to our bedroom sometime during the night. Standing in the doorway of the guest room, I watched him sleeping peacefully, his face relaxed and untroubled. How could he sleep so easily after last night? In the kitchen, I made espresso using the expensive machine Andrew had imported from Italy, its familiar hissing and steaming sounds oddly comforting in the quiet morning. I sat at our marble island, opened my laptop, and searched my contacts for Patricia Collins. Patricia had been my attorney during the prenuptial agreement negotiations before our wedding. Andrew had insisted on the prenup, citing his substantial assets and company stock as requiring protection. At the time, I had understood his position and appreciated his willingness to include generous terms for me. Patricia had negotiated skillfully on my behalf, securing provisions that would protect me in various scenarios, including divorce due to infidelity. I sent her a text at 7 a.m. Patricia need to speak urgently about my marital situation. Available today. Her response came quickly. In court until noon. Can meet at my office at 2 p.m. Everything okay? No, I replied honestly. We'll explain in person. I then called my assistant at the gallery to reschedule my morning appointment, citing a personal emergency. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed in a tailored black suit that I typically wore for important business meetings. Today would certainly qualify. As I applied my makeup, Andrew stirred and sat up in bed looking disoriented. You're up early, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I have meetings, I replied, my tone neutral. He watched me for a moment, perhaps assessing my mood after last night's revelation. About what Natalie said, he began cautiously. We'll discuss it later. I interrupted, unwilling to hear more excuses or explanations. I need to go. Celia, he called as I headed for the door. You know I love you, right? I paused, looking back at him. Do I? Before he could respond, I left the apartment, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. My first stop wasn't Patricia's office, but rather a private investigator recommended on her website. Michael Denton operated from a nondescript office in Midtown, his practice focusing on matrimonial investigations. Without an appointment, I had to wait 45 minutes, but he agreed to see me when I mentioned Patricia's name. Mrs. Bennett, he greeted me, ushering me into an office that looked more like an accountant's than a detective's. How can I help you today? I explained my situation succinctly, the dinner Natalie's offer my suspicions about an affair. I need concrete evidence before meeting my attorney this afternoon. Michael nodded, taking notes. Hotel meetings, you said. Do you know which hotel? The Four Seasons, I believe. At least that's what was mentioned in the text I saw. Names, please, full names, and any identifying information you have. I provided Natalie's full name, her position at Boston Children's Hospital, and the approximate dates when these meetings had begun. Michael typed efficiently, then looked up. My standard rate is $400 per hour plus expenses. I can begin immediately, but finding usable evidence typically takes time. I don't have time, I replied. I need something concrete by this afternoon if possible. He raised an eyebrow. That's an extremely tight window, Mrs. Bennett. What exactly are you looking for? Confirmation that my husband and this woman have been meeting at hotels for non-business purposes. Text messages, emails, hotel records, anything that proves they've been intimate. You understand, I can't illegally access private communications. I work within legal boundaries. Of course, but you can check public records, hotel guest registrations, perhaps speak to staff who might recognize them. Michael considered this, then nodded. I'll do what I can within the time constraints. Leave me your contact information, and I'll call if I find anything useful before your meeting with Patricia. From there, I went to our bank where Andrew and I maintained both joint and separate accounts. Using my authorized access, I printed statements from the past 6 months, noting any unusual expenditures or patterns. Several charges stood out: lunch bills far too high for one-person, jewelry purchases from Tiffany that I'd never received, and a recurring charge for a room at the Four Seasons on Thursday afternoons. By 1:30, I was sitting in a cafe near Patricia's office when Michael called. Mrs. Bennett, I found something you should see. Can you return to my office? 20 minutes later, I was looking at photographs taken from the Four Seasons security camera archive. Michael had a contact in hotel security who owed him a favor. The images clearly showed Andrew and Natalie entering and exiting the hotel on multiple Thursday afternoons over the past 3 months. In several photos, they were holding hands or standing inappropriately close. One particularly damning image showed them kissing in the elevator. "There's more," Michael said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your husband has been making reservations at this hotel under his company name, billing them as business development meetings. I have copies of the invoices which show room service charges for to and late checkouts. And you're certain this is all admissible, legally obtained? The hotel security footage is from public areas, elevators, and lobbies. The reservation information came from legitimate business sources. It's all above board." I paid Michael his fee plus a substantial bonus for the rush work, then headed to Patricia's office with the evidence secured in my briefcase. Patricia Collins hadn't changed much since our prenup negotiations. A tall, striking woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair, and a reputation for ruthless efficiency in divorce proceedings. Her corner office overlooked Bryant Park, the space designed to intimidate with its modern art and imposing desk. "Celia," she greeted me, gesturing to a chair. "What's happened?" I outlined the situation from the reappearance of Natalie in our lives to last night's dinner and the morning's investigation. As I spoke, Patricia took notes, her expression professionally neutral. "And you have evidence of the affair?" she asked when I finished. I opened my briefcase and laid out the photos, hotel receipts, and bank statements. Patricia examined each document carefully, nodding occasionally. "The prenuptial agreement we negotiated has a clear infidelity clause," she reminded me. "If either party commits adultery, the injured spouse receives 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage, regardless of whose name they're in, plus continued health insurance coverage and spousal support, for a period equal to half the length of the marriage." "I remember," I said quietly. "Your husband's company has grown substantially since your wedding. The value of his stock alone has increased by approximately $40 million. Under the terms of the prenup, you would be entitled to a significant settlement." The amount should have shocked me, but in that moment, money seemed almost irrelevant. What mattered was the betrayal, the calculated way Andrew had maintained our marriage while pursuing options with Natalie, using my infertility as his excuse. "What's our next step?" I asked. "I'll draft a separation agreement today. We won't file for divorce immediately. That's a strategic decision for later. For now, I suggest you secure your personal belongings and important documents. Do you have somewhere you can stay?" "I can get a hotel room." "Good. Don't tell Andrew where. Communication should go through me from this point forward." She closed the folder containing the evidence. "One more thing, Celia. Are you absolutely certain you want to end your marriage? Some couples work through infidelity." I thought about Andrew sleeping peacefully after Natalie's outrageous offer about the months of lies and secret meetings about the way he had shared our most private pain with his ex-girlfriend. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm certain." When I left Patricia's office, I had a clear plan and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since the fertility diagnosis. Instead of returning home immediately, I went to the gallery to check on the exhibition installations scheduled for that evening. Work had always been my sanctuary, and I needed the normalcy of overseeing art placement and lighting adjustments. My assistant Marco gave me a concerned look. "Everything okay?" "You never reschedule opening day meetings." "Family emergency," I said vaguely. "Is everything on track for tonight?" We walked through the gallery space together, discussing final details for the show featuring a promising young sculptor from Barcelona. The familiar routine calmed me, reminding me that I had an identity and purpose beyond my failing marriage. By 8 p.m., the exhibition opening was in full swing. Collectors, critics, and artists filled the space, admiring the sculptures and sipping champagne. I circulated professionally, discussing the artist's technique and vision-making introductions, ensuring everything ran smoothly. No one would have guessed that my personal life was imploding. Around 9:30, I saw Andrew enter the gallery, looking slightly out of place in his business suit among the more eccentrically dressed art crowd. He spotted me across the room and made his way over, holding a bouquet of peonies, my favorite flowers. "You didn't come home," he said, offering the flowers. I was worried. I accepted the bouquet automatically. "I had the opening. It's on my calendar." "I know, but you usually come home to change first." He lowered his voice. Celia, we need to talk about last night. I've been trying to call you all day. This isn't the place, I replied, gesturing to the crowded gallery. Then let's go somewhere else. Dinner, perhaps. I can't leave the opening. It's my responsibility to be here. He looked around at the successful event, then back at me with something like pride. You're amazing at what you do. I've always admired that about you. The compliment felt hollow after everything I now knew. Thank you for coming, Andrew, but I have guests to attend to. When will you be home? He persisted. Later, I said vaguely. Don't wait up. I turned away to greet an important collector, effectively dismissing him. From the corner of my eye, I saw him hesitate, then reluctantly leave the gallery. The flowers he brought remained at the reception desk, forgotten. The opening concluded successfully at 11, with several pieces sold and positive feedback from critics. I helped the staff with minimal cleanup, then called a car service to take me to the Pierre Hotel, where I had reserved a room for the night. In the elegant suite, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's revelations. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, still in my black cocktail dress from the opening, and let the tears come. I cried not just for the end of my marriage, but for the children we would never have together, for the future I had believed in, for the love I thought was real. When the tears subsided, I washed my face and changed into the nightgown I had hastily purchased at a boutique near Patricia's office. Tomorrow would be another day, another step in dismantling the life I had built with Andrew and beginning whatever came next. My phone lit up with a text from Andrew. Please come home. We can work through this. I love you. I turned off the phone without responding and slept dreamlessly until morning. For the next 3 days, I stayed at the Pierre, directing gallery business remotely and communicating with Patricia about next steps. Andrew called and texted constantly, messages ranging from apologetic to desperate, as he realized I wasn't coming back without explanation. Please talk to me, his texts read. Whatever you think happened with Natalie, you're wrong. Let me explain. Patricia advised against any direct contact until the legal groundwork was laid. He doesn't know what evidence we have, she reminded me during our daily calls. Let him wonder. It strengthens our position. On the 4th day, I returned to our penthouse at a time I knew Andrew would be at his office. Using the key fob that still worked, I entered quietly, half expecting to find Natalie there. Instead, the apartment was empty, looking exactly as I had left it days before. I moved efficiently, packing essentials into 2 suitcases, clothes, jewelry, personal documents, and irreplaceable mementos. I was careful to take only items that were undisputedly mine, leaving behind anything purchased jointly or gifted by Andrew. My goal wasn't to strip the apartment, but to retrieve what I needed to start over. In our home office, I copied financial records and photographs onto a flash drive, then gathered my personal laptop and tablet. I left my wedding and engagement rings on Andrew's desk with a note, Patricia Collins will contact your attorney. Please direct all communication through legal channels from now on. As I was leaving, the elevator opened and Andrew stepped out, looking haggard in a rumpled suit. He stopped short when he saw me with my suitcases. Celia, he breathed. Thank God. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. I'm fine, I said, stepping back to maintain distance. I'm just getting some things. His eyes darted to the suitcases. You're leaving. Over a misunderstanding at dinner. Is that what you call it? A misunderstanding? My voice remained steady. Your ex-girlfriend offered to have your baby because your wife can't, and you didn't immediately shut it down. That's not a misunderstanding, Andrew. That's a revelation. Natalie was out of line, I admit that. But it doesn't mean there's anything between us. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my ears. Do you really want to lie to my face right now, after the 4 seasons on Thursday afternoons, after sharing our most private struggles with her? His face paled. You've been spying on me. I've been uncovering the truth. There's a difference. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. It's not what you think. Yes, Natalie and I have been meeting, but it's complicated. We've been discussing potential medical options for us, for you. In hotel rooms, with room service for two and late checkouts. I shook my head. Please don't insult my intelligence. Andrew's demeanor shifted desperation, replacing his initial shock. Okay, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But it was just physical. Natalie and I have history, and when things got so difficult with the fertility treatments, I was weak. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough for her to offer to have your baby at dinner with your wife. That was her idea. Not mine. I never asked her to say that. But you discussed it with her, I pressed. You told her about my condition, about our private struggles. You betrayed my confidence to the one person who could use that information to hurt me the most. He had no response to that accusation, confirming its truth with his silence. My lawyer will contact yours, I said, moving toward the elevator. I'd appreciate it if you didn't contact me directly anymore. Lawyer, Andrew's voice rose in alarm. You're getting lawyers involved, Celia. We can work this out ourselves. Like you worked things out with Natalie in hotel rooms while I was injecting myself with hormones and grieving our failed IVF cycles. His face crumpled. I know I've hurt you. I'll do anything to make it right. Therapy, whatever you need. What I need is a divorce, I said, pressing the elevator button. A divorce, he repeated, stunned. Over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, Andrew. It was a series of calculated decisions. You chose to reconnect with Natalie. You chose to share our private medical information with her. You chose to meet her in hotels while lying to me about where you were. And when she made that offensive offer at dinner, you chose not to defend me or our marriage. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. I stepped inside with my suitcases, turning to face him as the doors began to close. Celia, wait, he called desperately. The prenup. You can't possibly want to do this. Think about what you're giving up. I already know exactly what I'm giving up, I replied calmly. And it's worth far less than I thought. The doors closed on his stricken face, and I leaned against the elevator wall, exhaling slowly. The confrontation had gone better than I'd expected. I had maintained my composure and said what needed to be said. I checked into a different hotel that evening, not wanting Andrew to find me at the Pierre. Patricia had advised changing locations regularly until I found a more permanent arrangement. Men like your husband don't give up easily, she warned, especially when there's money involved. The following morning, Patricia called with an update. Andrew's lawyer reached out. Richard Hoffman, he's good, but I've beaten him before. What did he say? They want to meet, discuss terms without formal filings. They're hoping to keep this quiet. That made sense. Andrew's company was preparing for another round of funding. A public divorce scandal with infidelity allegations could damage investor confidence. What do you recommend? I asked. We meet, but we go in strong. I've prepared a settlement proposal based on the prenup terms. 50% of assets acquired during marriage, including stock options that have vested or will vest from grants made during the marriage. Continued health insurance coverage. Spousal support for 18 months. The numbers she mentioned were staggering millions of dollars that would make me independently wealthy. Yet it wasn't about the money. It was about accountability, about consequences for betrayal. There's something else, I said. I want funds set aside for fertility preservation. Egg freezing specifically. If Andrew and Natalie are going to have the family I couldn't give him, I want the option to have children of my own someday with someone who deserves to be their father. Patricia's voice softened slightly. I'll add it to the demands. 2 days later, we met at Patricia's office. Andrew arrived with Richard Hoffman, both in formal business attire. I wore a simple navy dress, my face carefully made up to hide the effects of sleepless nights. Andrew tried to catch my eye as we sat at opposite ends of the conference table, but I kept my gaze fixed on Patricia or my notes. This was a business negotiation now, nothing more. My client is prepared to be generous, Richard began, sliding folders across the table. Full ownership of the art collection, the vacation home in the Hamptons, and a cash settlement of $5 million. Patricia didn't open the folder. The prenuptial agreement is clear on consequences for infidelity. Mrs. Bennett is entitled to 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage, not a token settlement. Richard leaned forward. The prenup requires proof of infidelity, which we dispute. My client acknowledges inappropriate communications but denies any physical relationship. Patricia smiled thinly and opened her own folder, laying out the photographs, hotel receipts, and bank statements. I believe these constitute proof under any reasonable standard. Would your client care to provide sworn testimony that contradicts this evidence? Andrew paled as he saw the images of himself and Natalie entering the hotel, their intimate posture leaving little doubt about their relationship. Richard examined the evidence, his expression hardening. We would need to authenticate these materials. By all means, Patricia replied. We welcome the discovery process, though it would of course become part of the public record. Andrew cleared his throat. Could we speak privately for a moment? Richard nodded and they stepped outside the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see them engaged in intense conversation, Andrew gesturing emphatically while Richard shook his head. When they returned, Richard's demeanor had changed. My client is prepared to accept the terms of the prenuptial agreement with some logistical considerations regarding the transfer of assets. Patricia nodded. We'll need a full financial disclosure to ensure all marital assets are properly valued. The meeting continued with technical discussions about stock options, property appraisals, and tax implications. Throughout it all, Andrew kept trying to catch my attention, his expression growing increasingly desperate as I maintained my professional detachment. As the meeting concluded, Andrew finally addressed me directly. Celia, can we talk? Just for a minute. Patricia started to intervene, but I raised a hand to stop her. 5 minutes. I agreed. We stepped into an empty office adjacent to the conference room. Andrew closed the door and turned to me, his composed executive demeanor crumbling. You don't have to do this, he said. We can work through this. I'll end all contact with Natalie. I'll do whatever you want. It's too late, I replied. You already made your choice. One mistake shouldn't erase 3 years of marriage. It wasn't just the affair, Andrew. It was discovering who you really are. Someone who would share my most painful vulnerability with the woman you were cheating with. Someone who would sit silently while she offered to have your baby, knowing how much that would hurt me. He flinched at the accuracy of the assessment. I panicked. I didn't know what to say. You should have defended me. You should have shut her down immediately. The fact that you didn't tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. My priority is us, our marriage. I shook my head. If that were true, you wouldn't have been meeting Natalie in hotel rooms while I was grieving our inability to have children. He had no response to that, his gaze dropping to the floor. I wish you well, Andrew. I hope whatever you build with Natalie or anyone else is based on something more genuine than what we had. As I turned to leave, he called after me. The company's stock is expected to triple after the next funding round. If you wait, the settlement would be substantially larger. I paused at the door. Do you really think I care about the money? Everyone cares about money, he replied, revealing perhaps more about himself than he intended. That's where you're wrong, I said softly. And that's why we were never going to work in the long run. I left him standing alone in that empty office, a successful man facing the consequences of his choices for perhaps the first time in his privileged life. Outside, Patricia was waiting. Everything okay? Yes, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. Everything is exactly as it should be. In the weeks that followed, news of our separation spread through New York's interconnected business and social circles. Andrew's company announced a temporary leadership restructuring as he took an unexplained leave of absence. The funding round he had been preparing for was delayed indefinitely, as investors expressed concerns about stability at the executive level. I moved into a furnished apartment in Tribeca, a temporary arrangement while I searched for a permanent home. The gallery became my sanctuary. The familiar routine of exhibitions and artist meetings providing structure during a time of personal upheaval. One morning, as I was reviewing submissions from new artists, my assistant Marco knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment but says it's important." "Who is it?" I asked, not looking up from the portfolio on my desk. "Natalie Palmer." My head snapped up. "Natalie is here. Now." Marco nodded, clearly aware of the situation from office gossip. "Should I tell her you're unavailable?" I considered this, then made a decision. "No, send her in." A minute later, Natalie walked into my office looking far less polished than she had at dinner. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face minimal makeup, her clothing casual, jeans and a sweater rather than her usual designer outfits. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, hovering uncertainly near the door. "What can I do for you, Natalie?" I asked, remaining seated behind my desk. She took a step forward. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior at dinner. What I said was inexcusable." Yes, it was. "I also wanted you to know that Andrew and it's over. It was a mistake, a selfish, horrible mistake." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're telling me this because I thought you should know the truth. Andrew didn't ask me to offer what I offered. That was entirely my own awful idea." "Did you think that would hurt me less? That my husband was only physically unfaithful, not planning a family behind my back?" She winced. "No, I just wanted you to have the facts." "The facts," I repeated. "Like the fact that Andrew shared my private medical information with you, or the fact that you used that information to deliberately hurt me at dinner?" "I was jealous," she admitted, her eyes dropping to the floor. "Andrew had everything: the successful company, the beautiful wife, the perfect life. I told myself he would be happier with me, that I could give him what you couldn't. And now? Now his company is in trouble, his reputation is damaged, and it's partly my fault." She looked up. "My husband found out about the affair. He's filing for divorce." I felt a strange lack of satisfaction at her misfortune. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" she asked, surprised. "Contrary to what you might think, I don't take pleasure in other people's pain. Even yours." Natalie nodded slowly. "That's why he loved you, you know. Your kindness, your dignity. Things I've never had." "Please don't tell me why my husband loved me," I said, my tone hardening. "You don't have that right." "Of course, I'm sorry." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you'll be a wonderful mother someday, Celia. However that happens for you." After she left, I sat in silence, processing the unexpected encounter. Natalie's apology changed nothing about the past, but it did confirm what I had suspected, that her offer at dinner had been calculated to destroy my marriage. She had succeeded, though not in the way she had hoped. Later that week, I received an unexpected email from Franklin Blackwell, one of Andrew's major investors. He requested a meeting to discuss matters of mutual interest. Curious, I agreed to have coffee with him at a quiet cafe in Tribeca. Franklin was in his 60s, a venture capitalist known for his shrewd investments and ethical business practices. He got straight to the point after minimal pleasantries. "I'm concerned about next-gen solutions," he said, referring to Andrew's company. "The recent personal issues have impacted investor confidence." "I'm no longer involved with the company," I reminded him. "But you're still a significant shareholder according to the settlement terms I've heard." I nodded cautiously. The divorce agreement included a substantial portion of Andrew's company stock, though I had no voting rights. "The board is considering removing Andrew as CEO," Franklin continued. "His judgment has been called into question, not just personally but professionally. Recent decisions have been erratic, risky." "Why are you telling me this?" Franklin stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "Because you know him better than anyone. Is he capable of steadying the ship? Or is this spiral going to continue?" I considered the question carefully. Despite everything, I didn't want to see Andrew's company fail. Too many people's livelihoods depended on it. "Andrew is brilliant at product development and vision," I said finally. "But he's always needed strong operational leadership beside him. If the board wants to save the company, they should keep him as Chief Innovation Officer, but bring in an experienced CEO. Franklin nodded. That's consistent with my assessment. Thank you for your candor. As we parted, he added, You know, with your eye for emerging talent and business acumen, you might consider joining some corporate boards. I sit on several that could benefit from your perspective. The suggestion surprised me, opening a door I hadn't considered. My world had been focused on the gallery and my marriage for so long that I hadn't thought about expanding my professional horizons. 2 months after my meeting with Franklin Next Gen Solutions announced a restructuring. Andrew would continue as Chief Innovation Officer with a seasoned tech executive taking over as CEO. The stock, which had plummeted during the uncertainty, stabilized and began to recover. By then I had closed on a new apartment in the West Village, a charming pre-war building with original details and large windows perfect for displaying art. It was entirely mine, purchased with part of the divorce settlement, decorated to my taste without compromise. For the first time in years, I was creating a space that reflected only my preferences and needs. I also began the process of egg freezing using funds specifically allocated for that purpose in the settlement. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was pursuing fertility preservation as a single woman, something Andrew and I had never considered during our marriage. The process was physically demanding and emotionally complex, but it gave me possibilities for the future that had seemed closed before. 6 months after the separation, the divorce was finalized quietly. The financial terms remained as negotiated, giving me financial independence and security. Andrew made one final attempt to reconcile, sending a handwritten letter to my new address. I know I've lost you, he wrote, but I want you to know that losing you has made me confront who I've become. I'm getting help therapy, trying to understand why I would hurt the one person who truly supported me. I hope someday you can forgive me, even if you never forget. I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. It went into a box of mementos from that chapter of my life, a chapter closed but still part of my story. Almost a year to the day after that fateful dinner with Natalie, I attended a gallery opening in Soho, representing a sculptor whose work I admired. As I studied a particularly striking piece, a voice beside me said, "The negative space is as important as the form itself, don't you think?" I turned to see a man about my age with kind eyes and an intelligent expression. He introduced himself as David Cohen, a professor of architecture at Columbia. We spent the next hour discussing the relationship between art and physical space, the conversation flowing naturally from aesthetics to philosophy. When he asked for my card, I gave it to him without hesitation. When he called the next day to invite me to an architectural exhibition, I accepted. And when after several months of dating he asked about my divorce, which had made enough financial news to be public knowledge, I told him the truth without bitterness or anger. "I can't imagine treating someone that way," he said when I finished the story, "especially someone you've promised to love and support." "It taught me to trust my instincts," I replied, "and to value honesty above appearances." David had his own past, a marriage that ended when his wife decided she didn't want children after all, despite their planning for a family. "I thought we wanted the same things," he explained, "until we didn't." His understanding of loss and disappointment created a bond between us, a shared appreciation for honesty and clear communication. When I told him about my fertility issues and the egg freezing process, he listened without judgment. "There are many ways to build a family," he said simply, "if that's what you want someday." "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. "For now, I'm enjoying discovering who I am on my own terms." He smiled. "I think that version of you is pretty remarkable." 2 years after my divorce, I expanded the gallery to a second location in San Francisco, traveling frequently between coasts to build our West Coast presence. David and I maintained a relationship that respected each other's independence while growing in emotional intimacy. During one of my San Francisco trips, I received an email from Andrew's assistant forwarding a press release. Next Gen Solutions was being acquired by a larger tech firm for a substantial sum. As a significant shareholder, I would receive a considerable payout when the deal closed. That evening, I called David from my hotel room. Andrew's company is being sold, I told him. The shares from the divorce settlement are worth almost triple now. How do you feel about that? He asked. I considered the question, validated in a way, not about the money, but about the choices I made. Walking away when I did, maintaining my dignity, focusing on building my own life rather than destroying his. Your revenge was living well, David observed. I never thought of it as revenge, I replied. More like reclamation, taking back my power, my future. Later that night, I stood at the hotel window overlooking San Francisco Bay, reflecting on the journey of the past few years. From the devastation of infertility, to the shock of betrayal, to the painstaking process of rebuilding. I had emerged stronger, clearer about my values, more authentic in my relationships. The woman who had calmly said, "Follow your heart," across that dinner table, was both a stranger and the truest version of myself. In that moment of crisis, I had found a core of strength I hadn't known I possessed. My phone chimed with a text from David. Missing you. The apartment is too quiet without your art lectures. I smiled and typed back, missing you too. Home in 3 days. Bringing art books as reinforcements. His response came quickly. I'll prepare my listening face. Love you. Those two simple words, love you, carried more meaning now than all the grand gestures and declarations of my marriage. Because this love was built on truth, on seeing each other clearly, on respecting boundaries and honoring commitments. I set down the phone and whispered to myself the words that had become a personal mantra since that fateful dinner. Follow your heart, but make sure your heart is wise. Has someone's betrayal ever led you to find unexpected strength within yourself? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and renewal in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own inner strength during difficult times. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to be defined by someone else's poor choices.